Hi, everyone, and welcome to Fierce Conversations with Toby, the show where we discover the silver lining in life's most difficult stories. I'm your host, Toby Dorr. In today's episode, we're going to explore how to step up, fill an empty niche, and make a difference in the world. Our guest today is Hannah Rumsey, creator of the podcast, Friends Missing Friends. Hi, Hannah. I'm so delighted to have you as a guest here today.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome. So I like to ask all of our guests a question that kind of give us a peek into who you are. And that is, what's your favorite color? And what does that say about you?
Yeah. So I have a few different ones.
Me too.
Oh, yeah.
I do. Yes.
That's amazing. Yeah, I'd love to hear what yours are too. But yeah, I think my favorite color is green. A close second is blue. And then lately I've been into, which has surprised me, I've been into like wearing like yellow and orange, which is very opposite of what I've been in the past. So.
Interesting. Yeah. So my favorite colors are pink and orange and purple, which are really the colors that you use in your podcast, kind of. So orange and the purple. So yeah, that's pretty good. Yeah, I have a hard time picking just one too. But if I had to pick only one, it would be pink. I just love all shades of pink. So
yeah.
Interesting.
I also love pink.
Yeah. I think pink, it's a color that most people shy away from because they think it's too girly, but pink is so powerful. There's so many shades of it. It can be deep, it can be bold, it can be soft, it can be sweet. There's just so many ways to go with it, which is one thing I love about it. So,
yeah.
Can you tell us about a crossroads in your life that pushed you in a different direction?
Ooh. Wow. Yeah. So this is just in general, like any kind of crossroads.
Yeah.
Yeah. So in college, well, I played trumpet from middle school through college. And then in college, I was suddenly having all these, everything kind of culminated at once. I kind of had a mental and physical breakdown. Like I was hurting my body and I was anxious all the time. So I stopped. And then that was a crossroads because I was like, okay, well, I've been doing this since I was like 12 and now I'm 20 and what the heck am I going to do? So I just kind of like went to psychology and went down that road. And then that switched a few years ago. So it's like a couple crossroads over 15-ish years.
Yeah. So you definitely had a crossroads a couple years ago when you lost a friend. And that kind of set you in this different direction. So tell us a little bit about that experience.
Yeah, absolutely. So in 2015, I was 23, I believe. And one of my closest friends just suddenly passed away, and I found out on Facebook. It was her birthday. So I went to post a happy birthday message on her wall. I actually posted it. And then I went to just scroll and look at the other posts, and I didn't see any other birthday message. I just saw rest in peace messages.
Oh, my.
Yeah. So it's one of those things, like, that's the first time I really learned what I've read in books, when you just go totally numb, because I didn't feel anything for like 5 minutes because I was just like, well, it can't possibly be true. I just talked to her last week, that logic that doesn't really make sense. And I read, there were articles people were posting that announced her, passing, and I read one and another and another and another. I read like 10 of the articles that were like, she fell off a balcony, she died. And it wasn't until like the 10th article that it was kind of like a dial, like a volume dial turning from silent to screaming. All of a sudden it all came flooding in and I just fell to the ground and I started screaming.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
I think our body does kind of numb us for a moment to give us a time to collect ourselves.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's a defense mechanism, I think.
I think so too. I mean, it is tragic to have someone that you love pass away. And it's even more tragic when they're young and when it's unexpected. And you kind of felt that you started looking around and there were options offered for people who lost parents, people who lost children, but you didn't find anything for people who had lost friends, how to deal with that loss of a friendship. So you decided to step in and do something about that.
Yeah. And it took several years for me to get to that point. And yeah, it's like, even to this day, I can't really find anything. I think I found one other friend-related grief thing on Instagram. But I haven't been able to find anything else. And I still can't really find anything on the internet. And it's one of those things where I'm sure they're out there, but they should be easily accessible.
They should be. Because, when people are searching for something and they just lost a loved one, it shouldn't be hard for them to find support, the support that they want. And so you have created this beautiful podcast, which I was just a guest on. My episode was just released this week, and I absolutely love it. But it's called Friends Missing Friends. And your podcast description says that you talk with those who have experienced the death of friends, grief experts, and more to normalize the complex grief of losing a friend in a world that doesn't often understand. Together we can cherish and remember the friends that we miss. I think that's just beautiful. And I love that you found a place to create where there was a gap. So, you have found a lack of information and decided to fill that in and make a difference in the world. And I think that's just beautiful.
Thank you.
There were a lot of directions you could have gone. You could have written a book. You could have, post on social media. How did you land on the podcast idea?
Yeah, that's a great question. It was during the beginning of COVID, it's like 2020. I think the idea came to me. I'm also working on a book, but that's going to take much longer.
It does take longer, that's for sure.
Yeah. And it's like one of those things where the idea just came to me. I was like, oh, podcast. I think Friends Missing Friends was my first title idea. And then you cycle through other titles and you're like, yes, I like the first one.
Sometimes your first idea is the strongest. It's the best.
Yeah. Sometimes
I know when I was contemplating doing a podcast and this word just kept swirling in my head. Fears. And I couldn't stop thinking about that word. And then when somebody said, well, you should do a podcast. And I said, what kind of title could I use with the word fierce? And the person I was talking to said, fierce conversations with Toby. And it was like, of course, that's it. Gosh. So, I just love it. Yeah. But, sometimes you just get that nudge and that's the right choice.
Yeah. And especially if the nudge doesn't leave you, like you just said, it just kept swirling around in your brain. And so, the idea for the podcast kept swirling around in my brain. And, I always feel like, someone told me that a plant uses the most energy to first burst out of the seed.
Oh, I love that.
Beautiful. I love
that. That is beautiful. I love that. I love that.
Yeah. So starting is always the hardest, I feel like. And then over time, it gains momentum. So starting the podcast and like declaring that I was real, that it wasn't just an idea.
Right.
Was the hardest thing, I think. But I do think it's a podcast for friends, made by friends, because my friends just kind of swarmed and helped. Like I had one friend compose the music, one friend did the artwork, another friend gave me advice. And it's just like one friend edited my trailer. And so it's just, it really, like, I felt so supported. And I love that it was like friends did that, because then it's about friends,
That is about friends. I think that's awesome, because really your podcast is about the beautiful relationship between friends. Yeah. And I think it's beautiful. And I was going to ask you about your the theme song on your podcast, so I'll just go to that now since you mentioned it.
Sure.
I had so much fun with the music for my podcast, and I actually had a friend of mine who composed it for me as well. So tell me about your theme and how it came about, and your friends who helped you with it, and what your theme song communicates.
Yeah, I just wanted it to communicate like a soothing, calming. I know I wanted it to be guitar, just like kind of like accepting, healing music.
Yes.
Yeah, that's sort of the idea I had, and I told my friend that, and he's a great composer, so he just kind of ran with it, and I was just like, it's perfect, no notes.
Yes, that's true. I loved my theme song too, and a friend of mine composed it, and she's got a music studio, and she plays in symphonies and things like that. She plays the flute. And when she gave me her, the file, and I listened to it the first time, and I thought, I like this. And I listened to it the second time, and then I listened to it the third time, and I said, that flute is asking a question. You could just hear it asking a question. And, then I sat down and talked with her about how she put it together, and actually, I'm doing a whole podcast episode, which releases next week, actually, about the thought behind the music. And I just thought it was so perfect. And I really think music, kind of sets the frame of mind when you come into something new. So I love that. I love that you had a friend, so appropriate, to create that music for you.
Yeah.
What steps were you surprised about when you started putting your podcast to life?
What steps was I surprised about? I guess I was surprised at how supportive people would be, which is funny because it's not like I thought people would be like, that's stupid, how dare you? But like, just, I would, like, when I first started asking for guests, I had to ask basically friends and friends of friends, just to start, and everyone was like, oh my gosh, of course, like, let me know how I can help. And it also just like kind of reminded me and reinforced the idea that, like, away from an individualistic type of belief system where it's like I have to do everything myself, kind of the who, not how kind of thing.
Right.
And it's like, oh, like I can just like find people to help me, and I don't have to know everything.
That's amazing, isn't it? And such a blessing. I think that's such a blessing. Yeah. I have a really good friend who does the production of my podcast. So I just do the recordings, and I send him the files, and he does all the editing and the publishing them. And it's such a blessing because I know I could do that if I had to. Yeah. But the fact that I don't have to, and I can really concentrate on just having the conversations I want to have and finding the people that I want to bring on my podcast, just makes me be able to produce something that's so much better.
Yeah.
So I love that when you can share duties and you have friends that help you with that. That's awesome. So I remember my mother's death as beautiful and peaceful. We knew it was coming, and she died in her home, and we were all there. And I think it was really a beautiful testament to all the love that we had for her. And, we let her go peacefully and surrounded by all of us. And that's not the way a lot of deaths occur, though. Yeah. But none of us can avoid death. And I think it's just beautiful that you provide an outlet for such a difficult and ignored topic. Nobody wants to talk about death. But when I listen to your podcast, I hear beautiful stories that inspire me. And I think that, that's such a gift to the world.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. So what podcast story that you've done so far has kind of stuck in your mind?
Oh, gosh. That's a great question. There's a lot, but one that really started a big shift in me was, I think actually even yours, of course, but I I don't know. I'll talk about that in a moment, but like going in order, like the first episode I did, was with this woman named Anna, and it was the first time I had really had a deep conversation with someone who had lost a friend, and she told me how, like, yeah, I absolutely feel like I am not allowed to be open and loud with my grief because I'm doing air quotes, just a friend.
Yeah.
I can't complicate the the grief of the family. And while like boundaries are, of course, like, you should be like aware of them and you should be respectful and careful of them, I feel like it's gotten to the point where we're so scared of crossing a boundary that we just say nothing.
Ah, interesting. I think that's true. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and that really made me, it was one of those moments where I was like, oh my gosh, I'm not alone. I'm not crazy.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. You know, episode 4 of my podcast, I talked to a friend of mine who lost her son at 5 years old in a plane crash. And we talk about how people don't know what to say to the grieving mother, you know? And so she talked about how she was in a grocery store and she started down an aisle, and it was a small town, so everybody knew everybody. And there were some women in the aisle, and when they saw her, they turned and left the aisle because they didn't know what to say. And I think it's so important to be there for people who have experienced a tragedy and a death of a loved one. And just, you know, we need to be more aware of things that you can say so that when you turn an aisle and see someone, you don't feel like you have to walk away because you don't know what to say. And I think that, you know, it can just be as simple as, you know, I'm here. Yeah. And I support you. You don't have to offer anything in particular except to just let them know that you are there for them. So that's so true. And I think, so you talk about death doulas and that you had never even knew such a thing existed. And I didn't either, but I kind of picture it as some kind of beautiful hospice type worker that doesn't dispense medicine, just dispenses love. So tell me what you've learned about death doulas.
Yeah, I'm shocked that I hadn't heard of it, but it might be a fairly new thing as far as in the course of history. But yeah, you know, just like you said, they dispense love. They're there for the family and the person who's dying. And they also talk to the person who's dying and help them come up with a legacy, something they want to leave behind.
I love that idea.
Yeah. Whether it's a project or, you know, whatever, it's probably different for everyone. But yeah, just really like help them to ease into, just like we ease people in birth, ease them into beautiful death. So
I love that. You know, and death is a part of life. And we shouldn't be afraid of it. And we shouldn't be, it shouldn't have this big forbidden taboo thing around it because we can't avoid it. And I know from the experience with my mother's death that, you know, it can be beautiful and it can be a peaceful event. It doesn't have to be some tragedy. And I just think it's such a blessing for me to have experienced that. And, you know, not every death is that way. Not every death we know is going to happen. Some tragic things happen. But I think we can learn how to respond to those events just by accepting that death is a part of our existences. You know, it's not something to be avoided and forbidden to talk about. So I think that's beautiful. And your podcast, you know, I've listened to several of them, and they give people an opportunity to share their own experience. And I think there's nothing more powerful than to learn from someone else's experience because you hear how someone else went through it, and that kind of triggers, oh, I could do it that way too. So I just think that's a beautiful gift to the world.
Thank you.
So tell us a little bit about your friend. What was her name? Was it Lauren?
Lauren, yeah.
Lauren,
Yeah, I'd love to. So we met at a music camp. You know, I played the trumpet growing up, and it was a summer music camp that was 6 weeks long. and we met in the registration line. So the very first day. And it's one of those memories that's crystal clear, where, you know, my mom was in line with me. I feel like she was always trying to help me make friends because I was pretty shy.
Yeah.
Yeah. So she just randomly picked Lauren, because I think she was in line right in front of us. I think she tapped her on the shoulder, and then Lauren turned around, and Lauren was with her mom. And my mom, you know, in her like very cheery voice was like, "What's your name? This is my daughter, Hannah." And I was like, oh my God. I was so embarrassed. And I just remember like Lauren's smile, because I was embarrassed at first. But then Lauren just had this really like sweet, eager smile where she was like thrilled actually that the stranger had just introduced a new friend to her. Which was really special, because that also like put my guard down almost immediately. Like, oh, like she actually wants me. She's not like embarrassed for me right now. She's actually happy that this happened, and she wants to be my friend. And we like ran off to explore the grounds together. And it was like by the second day when we met up again, it was almost, you know, when you have the implicit understanding of like, yeah, you're going to be my person.
Yeah. Yeah. That's pretty cool.
Yeah. And like we spent most of the days of the rest of the days together. So 42 days of many, many hours together. And that was the only time we spent together in person, actually.
Oh, so after the camp, then you just stayed in touch, but it was by phone or email or messenger or something.
Yes. And actually, to correct that, she did visit once, but it was that same year, you know, a few months later, and just for a couple days. But then, yeah, after that, it was all like we would text, Facebook message, Skype pretty regularly. And, you know, over the years, it would get less and less frequent. But our session, we would talk for like 4 or 5 hours because we had to catch each other up on 6 months. Stop. So we were always really like up to the very end, really close. Like she actually was going to Skype me as soon as she got home from Spain, but she died in Spain.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Yeah. That's pretty tough. And to lose someone in the prime of their life too.
Yeah.
So, you know, I think what you've created is a beautiful testament. It's a legacy to Lauren, really.
I hope so.
Yeah, I think that's beautiful.
Yeah. Thank you.
I think that's beautiful. What advice would you give for someone wanting to start their own podcast?
Oh, yeah, I would say, just start like after you have an idea of what you want to have, a pretty clear idea of what you want it to be about. Just start recording. Because you can always not use it, you know?
Yeah.
I think it was that fear of like, oh my gosh, it has to be perfect right away. But it's not like it's being immediately like, you know, broadcast live. So yeah, just start recording, whether it's on like a recording software. There's lots of options out there now. And then just see what happens. And I feel like it can evolve over time, you know, into something that feels right and feels ready.
I think that's true. You know, and I found starting a podcast was really a lot easier than I thought it would be. I mean, there were some things I had to set up, you know, my recording software and things like that. But you just get people into your space and you just have a conversation with them and give them the ability to tell their story. And, you know, I believe in the power of stories, and I think all of us have stories to tell. And even though you may have 3 people come on who have similar stories, they're all going to be different. And each story is going to reach a different group of people because it's just about the connection that they have with the person telling the story. And so I think when we provide an opportunity and a tool to bring stories into the world, that we are just creating a healthier place, because you never know who's going to hear the stories that you bring and what a difference it's going to make in their life. And you may never know. Somebody may hear one of your podcasts and it just changes their life in such a tremendous way. and they go on and are inspired to do something magnificent, and we never even know it.
Yeah.
But that's the beauty of podcasting, I think.
Yeah, the ripple effect is, you can never really necessarily know it. And I agree that stories are so important. I mean, like, all of my hobbies and interests revolve around storytelling. Like, I love podcasting, I love writing, I love movies, I love TV, I love books, and they're all because they're stories.
That's right.
I feel like the bedrock of humanity is stories, and
I think you're right. I think way back when we didn't have anything, we sat around in the evening and told stories. Yes. And that's how we learned. That's how we learned everything. And I think stories are so powerful. And I really think that's what podcasts do, is just give you another avenue to send stories out into the world so that they can do their thing.
I agree. And it's funny because I was thinking the exact same thing. Like, we've lost that sense of community, I feel like, unless you specifically go out and find that storytelling community. And instead we're getting our stories from a glowing box.
Yes, that's right. That's right.
It's fine, but like, if that's the only thing that it doesn't have that same sense of community.
I think the stories you get from podcasts are like from real people. And the stories you get on TV shows are dramatized and sensationalized and often unbelievable. So I just think it's just a way to connect more people, to bring more people together. I think it's pretty powerful. I think podcasting might be the best thing that the whole internet has created, because I think it's created a lot of negative things too. But I think podcasting is the saving grace. So I think that's pretty cool. Yeah.
And I love how
and you can listen to a podcast when you're driving in your car. Or cutting your grass or doing anything. And it's not like you have to go sit down in front of a TV and turn it on and not do anything else for 30 minutes. So I just think it's a beautiful tool to share stories with the world. And I love the stories that you're sharing because they're so needed. No, everyone avoids your topic. So
yeah, thank you so much.
You're welcome. So you talk about how hosting your podcast has helped you to grow. Tell me a little bit more about that.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. So many ways. I think part of it is like just actually really talking to people for long periods of time. I mean, without the platform of a podcast, it's kind of a hard ask to be like, hey, do you want to talk about death for an hour?
Right.
I didn't really have
to sit down for coffee and talk about death.
Exactly. Right? There wasn't that much of that, but like this, I've been able to talk about death for many hours now, and not just death, but life and like people's friendships and stories. And that in itself, just getting to share and notice similarities in other people's stories has helped me feel less crazy, like I said, less isolated, more connected to humanity. And also, like, when I first started the podcast, I was very insecure about my friendship with Lauren because we didn't have the label of best friend. So I thought that I didn't have ownership over my grief because it didn't have a label, like the highest label,
Right.
And I think a lot of that is our society. And a new book has come out called Platonic, where it talks about the science of how our society does not value friendships as much as romance. Like it's an actual thing. And I was like, this is what I've been noticing. And I thought it was just me.
Wow.
It's a real thing. And so because society doesn't value it, and because there's only really one label for it, like best friend, and because I didn't have that label, I thought, well, clearly I'm not allowed to feel as deeply as I'm feeling. And I'm just clinging to this thing that maybe wasn't as real as I thought I was.
That's tough, but it's so profound too, and I think about my relationships that I have in my life now, and I'm lucky to have a group of 6 women that we were put together as a writing group, women who are working on memoirs. And we met on Zoom. We started out meeting once a week on Zoom. And that was 2 years ago, more than 2 years ago. And we're still meeting. So, it was an assignment for a group we were in, and we just continued on. And once a year we get together for a 4-day weekend. And
oh my gosh,
we have helped each other through so many things, and it's so important. And so I kind of think of them as sisters.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
They're beyond friends, they're sisters, but we're not blood related. So you're right. It's kind of, there's not really a word for it. There's not a word for those deep friendships that are so important to us. And, you met Lauren at a time in your life where things made an impression.
Yes.
So I think some of those friendships that occur during that age in our lives are deep, and you don't have to see them every day in order for that friendship to not be a big part of your life. So, and of course, with the way the world is today, there are a lot of people who have friendships that aren't in person because people are so spread out.
Yeah.
And I know with my pod sisters, we don't live near each other. We meet, on Zoom, but we've managed to create these really deep, profound relationships. So you don't have to have them next door to be super close. And I think that's just beautiful.
Thank you. Yeah. And I agree. Like that, the age I met her, I was 17. She was 14 going on 15. I was incredibly impressionistic, and you're still figuring out who you are, and your personality is still forming. And she really not so much molded my personality, in that she unlocked parts of my personality that I was maybe didn't know were there, or were ashamed of. She is to this day, the goofiest, silliest person I've ever met. Just lived life to the fullest. I the example I use is, we were walking through the grounds, and at one point she just started galloping like a horse, and neighing really loudly, and throwing her hair and stuff. And I just joined in next to her. We were both galloping, people were looking at us we were crazy. But it's one of those things where because I was with her, I didn't feel shame.
Yeah, you had permission.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah, I do think friends bring out the best in us, and they're so important. And for a lot of years in my life, I really didn't have any close friendships. I mean, for the majority of my life. And now that I have created these really strong friendships late in my life, I just treasure them, and I realize how much I missed by being too busy to really cultivate any strong friendships. So I do think friends bring a lot to our life. And I love the whole format of your podcast. I think it's delicious.
Oh, that's so nice.
So what's one question you wish I'd asked? Is there something you'd like to share with us that we haven't talked about?
Yeah, well, I do want to say that you being on my podcast was so special. I'd read your memoir, and it just being able to talk to you about it was incredibly meaningful, and that learn more about your relationship with Lisa and everything. Gosh, I re-listened to the episode last week when it came out, and I was like, oh my gosh, what a deep, meaningful conversation. And just about how you were talking about the unexpected sisterhood, which is in your subtitle of your, of the women you met in prison, and how, you spent pretty much every moment of every day together. So it was almost like you were married, is what you said.
Right.
Yeah.
It certainly was. And, I love that podcast. And we recorded it quite a while ago, and then it just came out this week. And I listened to it, and I thought, I said that? Wow, I love this, and I've shared it with everyone I know. I said, you guys have got to listen to this podcast. So, and this weekend I had to go to an event, a luncheon for a reentry program in Washington, D.C., And on the way home, I told my husband, I want you to listen to this podcast. And I, connected it to the car and we listened on the way home. And he said, that's pretty good. That's a pretty good podcast. So, I just love it. I just love it. It's my favorite interview I've ever done, I think.
Wow. That means truly so much to me. Like, wow. Thank you.
Yeah. You just were so soft and gentle in the podcast and just made it safe for people to share, the deepest hurtful things. And it was a beautiful place to be. So I loved everything about it. So thank you so much for that.
Yeah. Thank you for being on it and being so open and vulnerable and really talking about like life's deepest pain and deepest joy. It's like, I wish we went there more often,
I do too, because I think it makes us deeper, richer people.
Yeah.
When you just live on the surface, it's just fun, but it's not profound. And I think getting deeper really brings out the best of us all.
Yeah.
So I just love that. Well, thank you so much, Hannah, for being a guest on my podcast. I've loved every minute of it. And
thank you.
There is a link to me being in your podcast on my website. So,
amazing.
If anybody wants to hear that podcast, or you can go to Hannah's podcast, Friends Missing Friends, and I was episode 18, I think.
Yes.
Yeah. So, excellent. Well, thank you so much, Hannah.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. Thank you for joining me on Fierce Conversations with Toby. Your support and listening means so much to me, and I hope today's conversation makes a difference in your world. If you would like to support this podcast, there are many ways to do so. I found these ways tend to help the most in getting our message out into the world. Number 1, subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify Podcasts, YouTube, or wherever you listen to or watch this podcast. If you can leave a 5-star rating or a like on this episode on YouTube, that helps even more. And if you leave a comment or a review, that helps the most. The next way you can support Fierce Conversations with Toby is to join our Patreon at patreon.com/Fierce Conversations. All tiers come with a downloadable digital gratitude journal created by me and membership in a private Facebook group that I also lead. Most importantly, 10% of all proceeds from your subscription will go directly to donating my workbooks to women in prison. Finally, sharing the link to this show with your friends, family, and anyone who wants to listen is appreciated more than I can say. Thank you again for joining me today and supporting this show by listening to it and sharing it with friends. Fierce Conversations is created and hosted by me, Toby Dorr. Produced by Number 3 Productions. The theme song that you're hearing now, Grieving, was composed and arranged by Lisa Plass. Lisa also plays the flute for the theme, with Carolyn Parody on piano and Tony Ventura on bass. Find out more at tobydor.com. This is Fierce Conversations with Toby. Escape your prison.